Doncic wins the game at the buzzer.
The More Better Podcast.
What up, everyone? Welcome into the Board Better Show. I am back, your host, Josh. I'm joined by another special guest this week, a good friend of mine who I get to chat to multiple times a week. So it's nice to have you on this show this time around. Mr. Alex Christensen, a.k.a. Noops on Twitter. How you doing, my man?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I love the intro song, the color. This is all looking really nice. I had fun the other day. It's kind of trolling in the chat a little bit, but I've been listening to the shows afterwards. I loved what you did with Matt Moore. I had a chance to talk futures with him actually earlier the same day. So, yeah, it's great. It's always nice just to talk more NBA and have more space to talk about all this stuff, especially closer to tip-off time when we hopefully know a little more.
Yeah, exactly. It's been that sort of season, that's for sure. But always fun to talk, like you said, more NBA that we want to talk about. And if you guys want to listen, even better. But hey, I'm happy just to go back and forth either way. As everyone knows, the 4 segments that we will run today, as per normal, we'll go through our homework review, look at things happening around the league where we can potentially get ahead of markets there. We're going to do a scouting report on the Dallas Mavericks today because they're just a weird team who I personally can't figure out. I'm hoping Noops has some more answers to what to expect from them going forward. We'll look at the bets that we've made for today. And then the one segment that everyone tunes in for, which is Squad Ride and No Pressure Noops. They are 3-1 on their Squad Ride bets. You'll be picking out their best bet from the Discord today.
I'm ready.
I'll be rooting the other way most likely because we can't have their egos too inflated. But let's dive into the start of things. Let's look at the homework review, have a look at things across the league. I'll let you go first today, Noobs, on your homework review and what it is that you're looking at, where you think we could potentially find ourselves a little bit of value out there.
Yeah, we're about halfway through the season, and as much as it can be troublesome to look at trends and things, but from a macro perspective, there's one thing that really sticks out to me as odd. Home teams, particularly this year, have been fantastic. As you look back, if you just blindly bet home teams, you're up about almost 3 units. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot because if you bet road teams, you're down almost 68 units once you start to include the juice. So this is something that at this point, the market obviously is not assessing home court advantage properly. So what's driving that? And as I dug a little bit deeper, I came up with kind of an interesting stat, something I think we've talked around a lot, you and I, people in other chats and on shows, about how back-to-backs at home aren't necessarily the same back-to-back. And it really bared out in some of the results here. As I start to look at games for home for teams on back-to-back, road teams 64 and 69, pretty close to 50%, 48%. But home teams on back-to-backs this year are 65 and 42. You're up, I think, about 17 units just blindly betting those spots, almost 61% hit rate. And again, you got to dig a little deeper and try to find better spots. But I wonder if, market makers are struggling to figure out, again, kind of that fatigue angle. Because, again, you probably have some formulas set up. It's a back-to-back, do this, da-da-da-da-da. And given some of the changes the NBA has made in schedules, teams are staying home longer. Teams are going on the road longer as opposed to kind of jumping around back and forth. And I wonder if that adds to the home court advantage. One of the things I haven't had time yet to do this afternoon, but I'm going to try to look at and see, do teams get better every game they play at home? So like game 4, are they better than game 3? Game 5, are they better than game 4? Because there just seems to be something in the results bearing out. And I think it's schedule related and stuff like that, but don't be afraid to bet home teams on a back-to-back.
Yeah, and home dogs period this season seems to be the most profitable angle in the NBA. If you're just blindly betting those, you're doing pretty damn well this season. On the back of that, have you found yourself adjusting your home court value as the season has gone on? And is it drastically different now to what it was when opening night came around?
I should be doing a little bit more of that. A couple of weeks ago, I went back and sort of tweaked things. Based on my numbers, it did look like home court picked up. I added about 0.2, maybe 0.3 points to most home court advantages when I have at the beginning of the year. In general, for most teams, I have it at 2, maybe 2.5. Teams like Denver, teams like Utah might be 3.5, especially given kind of what the schedule looks like there. I find the teams like Miami that are fun to be in, as much as you might roll your eyes at that, I give them a little extra boost. Like it's LA, there seems to be harder to play there. So yeah, a couple weeks ago, I went back and adjusted everything about 0.2, maybe 0.3 points. So about a 10% adjustment, I would say, positive for home teams. Because again, it seems to be a great angle. And I still haven't figured out why, but teams are doing much better on their home court than they have.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done the same. Maybe a little bit more aggressively, but I think also to start the season, I was a little bit lower than market and most people in the value of home court. Aside from, like you said, the outliers like Denver and Utah, of course, which are always going to be greater than the rest of the field. But that's definitely something I think worth trekking into. And if you do decide to go deeper into it, I'm sure we'd love to hear more about it next time we get you on as well. On any conclusions you might have come. Yeah. Um, my homework review is just going to be a quick one. Excuse me, touching on the Charlotte Hornets, which is not a fun team to necessarily talk about, but the difference that this team has when LaMelo Ball is on the floor versus when he's not on the floor, and the potential, I think, to get ahead of market, especially now at this moment in time where their offense is obviously night and day different when he's there. Much more efficient scoring the basketball, almost 5% better in terms of effective field goal average, almost 6 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor versus not. But their defense is also so much worse when he's off, when he's on, and that leads to a lot more overs than what we were seeing from Charlotte early in the season, where they were actually an unders team for a very large portion, and a little bit was no LaMelo, a little bit was, is this because Steve Clifford's there and he's not letting them run and gun as much as they were last season? The slower offense, the fact that he wants to, for whatever reason, play through Mason Plumlee more than he should be allowed to. But now that LaMelo is sort of back in the rotation consistently, we're seeing them back to not quite the levels that they were last season, but certainly performing to the same extremes offensively, where they can get hot in a hurry and put up points in quick succession as a result. Like I said, defensively, they're almost 7 points per 100 possessions or worse when he's on the floor. Teams almost 5% better effective field goal average as well. They are obviously having more turnovers and generating less turnovers. So all of those things just generally lead to more points as a whole. I think as well, the biggest thing is the change in their offensive shot distribution. If you have a look at that, they take a lot more threes, a lot more high quality looking threes as well. Almost 7% more of their field goal percentage average comes from beyond the arc, which is a pretty notable jump. I think the biggest beneficiary as well, if you're looking for player props, is Terry Rozier, because his points average, his 3 points made average goes drastically up when LaMelo's on the floor. I don't think that's too surprising personally.
He's with less usage.
Yeah, he's always been more of a shooting guard for me anyway. He's someone who is an above average catch and shoot guy, I think, personally. So, yeah, the less responsibility he has on being a playmaker and the more he's allowed to just focus on scoring, the more efficient he's going to be. And there's a very, very noticeable difference. So if you're betting Rozier props, it's unders when LaMelo's not playing, it's overs when LaMelo's playing, and you'll be making quite a tidy profit there. But for me, like I said, it's just going to be looking at a lot of their totals to be over and a lot of their spreads to be covered, especially when they're inflated numbers. We got on them against Miami yesterday. If you can get them in favorable spots and if you can get large numbers with them as underdogs, I mean, they're only 10-10 against the spread and when LaMelo has been on the floor this season. So it's not like there's a huge edge to be found there. But when you do look at specifically them playing without a schedule disadvantage spot, you'll find that they are actually quite profitable ATS, and they can, as we've seen, they blew out Milwaukee by 24 points or something, but 48 hours earlier they got blown out by 25 points by Memphis. So they're still a very sporadic team. I just think that in the right situations and the right spots, they might be profitable. Alex, for you with Charlotte going forward, this isn't a team I don't think that's necessarily embraced tanking. I think they just suck for the most part. But in the back half of the season, are they going to go down the route of pulling LaMelo, do you think, at some point and just bottoming me out as much as possible? Or are they stubbornly just going to keep playing this out and doing whatever it is Steve Clifford's trying to do, which I'm not too sure what that is?
I guess to maybe say it a different way, sometimes the universe provides, and it seems for whatever reason that LaMelo Ball can't stay on the court, and that is, like you said, been great for them and their desire to kind of lose some of these games. I mean, it doesn't seem like a team that is going to be making any sort of acquisitions to get better. I wonder if there's any parts they can sell. Again, I wonder if this season is kind of, let's keep LaMelo Ball healthy. Let's try to get him into next year playing good basketball. Let's see if we can find a way to trick Gordon Hayward into retiring. I love what you said about Terry Rozier. I think that's a great angle. Because your immediate thought would be LaMelo Ball comes in, that takes usage away from Rozier. That should be less shots for him, less stuff like that. But you think about the role, right? It's less of him trying to create and more of him taking advantage of that. I'd be curious to see. Mitch is talking about kind of the Plumlee stats. That's really interesting to look at stuff like that. So that's a great angle. I love the over angle, but overall, I don't think much is going to change for the Charlotte team. They're going to be bad. Like you said, against the spread, it hasn't made a big difference when Ball's in or out. So I think it is more about totals and props as opposed to the Hornets being good. I mean, even if he does play, you start to look at their depth chart here. It's still hysterical to me that Mason Plumlee is a starting center or a starting player in the NBA. PJ Washington seems to be part of every trade talk.
Did you see the report that they have actually put Mason Plumlee on the trade block and all it will take is a first-round pick to get him?
That's it? What are the protections? Top 30 protected? It's a bad team. There's nothing good about this. They don't even have any fun rookies to play. That's kind of a sad thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Shouldn't we be trying to get Jalen McDaniels, JT Thor, all these guys a bunch of minutes? What happened to Kai Jones?
Yeah, Kai Jones is, I don't even know if he's even in the rotation at all. He's played 177 minutes this season. James Bouknight's another one, 290 minutes.
He seemed kind of like a limited college player, and he was one of those guys. Some guys stay in college because they want to stay. Some guys stay because it's just easier, and he seemed kind of like one of those guys. But yeah, you look at this; they got to find something to do with Gordon Hayward. They got to just those minutes are useless. It's time to move on from that. I love watching Dennis Smith Jr. play basketball, but it's just kind of wasted their time. If it just get some of these young guys minutes, but I think the Hornets are going to be rough the rest of the way. But I love those over angles, and I like looking at some of those player props for points and stuff for these guys. That again, I think the market. I'm curious to see maybe how they adjusted that Terry Rozier points number. I bet they adjusted it down a bit, and it probably should have gone the other way.
It did. So it ticked down 1.5 points, I think, in most places when LaMelo came back, and his 3-pointers made as well. Went from being juiced over 2.5 to being evens 2.5. Sometimes you could get it plus money in certain places, which is very wrong. Like I said, if you just look at the difference between them when he's on the floor and not on the floor. So that's, I think, the strongest angle to look at is some props angles. But I do think that there is advantages to be had as well on full game overs, team total overs for the Charlotte Hornets with LaMelo comfortably in the lineup, at least up until the All-Star break where, like I said, they might pull him and just bottom out. But at the same time, I don't know what the direction of that franchise is right now. I think they need to make that a little bit clearer. And like you said, if they can get off some of those really bad contracts like Gordon Hayward, even Terry Rozier is not a good contract to have on your roster. At least it'll clear a pathway for them to try and become competitive long-term with LaMelo there. But some interesting there, homework review, and a lot, I think, to keep an eye on. Like you said, those home splits as well is something that we should definitely dive deeper into and see if we can get to the bottom of what it is that's making home teams so much more reliable this season. But let's jump into our next segment. Let's have a look at the scouting report because we're going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who our friend Spread Astaire took a futures on at a pretty long price. Firstly, what do you think of that bet? And secondly, is there a clear path for the Mavs to get better without making a trade?
You had to throw that little caveat in there because I was trying to think of something positive. And it was a lot about trade-related stuff. But as you start to look at this team, it's been really poor the last month or so. And what really scares me is it looks like it's just Christian Wood. For some reason, not having Christian Wood has just tipped the scale. Now, it could just be, a lot of weight of things. They lose their best defensive player of the offseason to free agency. They lose probably their second, third best defensive player in Maxi Kleber early in this year for the rest of the season. And now things are really tight. I mean, they're back to playing Frank Ntilikina. They're back to playing, other Josh Green. I'm sorry, no, just Josh Green. I always think Jalen Green's name is Josh. Anyway, it's still surprised at how much Reggie Bullock we're getting to see. It's really crazy how thin this roster is. Now, they have draft picks. I don't know what you can put with those draft picks. I mean, does somebody want to take on that Bertans contract? That's really ugly. Can they get anything for Tim Hardaway? So you're kind of at the point, right? Like you said, without a trade, man, there's really not anything out there. There's not going to be that many buyout guys or goofy stuff like that. I mean, if they have to spend the rest of the season with this roster of less than 100% Luka Doncic, I just don't know if there's enough juice here.
Like the biggest fall off, like you said, is obviously having lost a couple of key pieces in that regard, but the defense has regressed in a huge way. Basically back to where they were before Jason Kidd got there, or even in his first season in charge, where they were still a bottom 10 team, but they were making progress in the right direction, yada, yada. Then last season, top 10 in points per possession, effective field goal percentage, offensive rebound percentage allowed, free throw rate allowed. They really knuckled down. They were a very cohesive unit at that end of the floor. And now this season, it's just all come undone again. And like you said, losing Brunson didn't help. Having not had Kleber for such a significant period of time certainly hurts them. But these aren't guys that should be having the level of impact that is seemingly being had on this Dallas defense. They are 22nd in points per 100 possession, 18th in opponent effective field goal percentage, 19th in turnover percentage, and bottom half in opponent offensive rebounding percentage as well. Second chance points being allowed, and dead last in free throw rate. So teams getting to the line, attacking absolutely at will. What can they do to better themselves defensively right now and at least get back to being an above average unit at that end of the floor? Because I think offensively, at least when the playoffs come around, you always have Luka, and in the half court the half court playoff environment, having someone of that magnitude that can score the bucket and create shots for wide open shots as well for teammates at will means you're always going to have a chance. But until they fix that defense, I think the ceiling for this team is very clearly at best a second round appearance in the NBA playoffs, maybe even first round, depending on the matchups.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you're putting basically all your baskets in the Luka goes nuclear, basket. It's a lot to expect from him. I mean, defensively speaking, and again, if they can't find a way to make a move for a better big man who can rim protect a little bit, find a way to get another wing, which again, the same thing everyone else is trying to do in this marketplace. And I just don't know who those guys are. Do you just try to go big? Do you look down the bench and go, you know what, we're going to start JaVale McGee, and he's still going to play maybe 10, 15 minutes a game, but we're going to start with that. And then when he goes out, we're putting Dwight Powell in and Ntilikina in, and Hardaway comes out, and it's just this real, it almost looks like the Sixers team that went to the finals. It's ugly. It is an ugly, brutal game, but you just know the one guy is going to get you enough points in Luka to get you through that game. And maybe you can find something to unlock that, but it's really, really rough trying to look at this roster and figuring out what you're going to have to do. I mean, I really don't envy what Kid has to deal with.
Well, I mean, we just got the mention in the comments as well. You have Jalen Brunson and Porzingis both looking fantastic in their respective roles for their new respective teams post being there. Is this going to be a long-term issue for Dallas where it is difficult to find players who can maximize their potential playing alongside Luka?
It's a really tough question, right? Because no one wants to, so is Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, or James Harden in Houston?
Yeah.
Is he going to be that guy who's out there making crazy passes, getting everybody involved, doing stuff, being an MVP? Or is he really just going to be this kind of high usage, get to the rim, shoot a fadeaway three guy? And that's kind of what we've seen. Now, as a bit of chicken and egg in terms of, is it the roster that they put around him or the way that they kind of embrace, they really bend over backwards for him. That is his team. They'll do whatever they want, and he knows he's the guy. But at the same time, you stick him with this team that still, even last year, if you take the same team, you leave Wood, you put Brunson, and it's not a great roster. Who is there here really to flourish? And, you start to look at Porzingis. I don't think any of that has to do with Luka. I think that's just Porzingis being in a place where they actually want to use a big man. That's a fit thing. I think Brunson would be just as good on this team as he on the Knicks. Now, he's a little more responsibility on the Knicks. It's a little more of a defensive-minded team. But I think overall, they've just done a really bad job of putting players around Luka Doncic. I mean, who is his best teammate in his career? I mean, is it Porzingis? Is it Brunson? Am I missing somebody? Because it's pretty rough.
It's definitely one of those two. It's not a long list to work through, but yeah, I think like you said, it's getting to that point where the conversations, I think, are fairly being had as to whether this is going to be a James Harden Houston situation where the players you can put around him, the pool to work with is so limited in terms of, they have to meet such a specific criteria in order to be able to, I guess, be worth the value that they bring to the table from a financial perspective, but also that they, quite simply, the traditional 3-and-D, can they hit wide open shots? Can they defend? And that's kind of what you're working with. And like you said, the whole league is trying to find those guys. So to try and find ones that are contract friendly and don't necessarily put too much strain on ownership is also a conversation to be had. And then the flip side being, how many of those players are going to embrace that role? How many of those players want more in terms of responsibility and potential within that organization? And how many are willing to sort of bite the bullet and say, well, this is just going to be the Luka show and I'm just going to play my role. And I think outside of vets, it's going to be hard to bring in young talent that sort of fits that same timeline that what Luka's on, right?
Yeah, I think you're at the point where if you're the Mavericks, you're trying to put together picks to get some kind of second tier star, somebody who was a first round pick on a team that hasn't quite put it together. Obviously Toronto has a lot of kind of interesting little pieces there. Like, I wonder what OG Anunoby would do kind of playing next to Luka Doncic. Would that be fun for him to actually have somebody who could pass for the first time in his entire career? Again, maybe somebody like Van Vliet. Van Vliet would be a perfectly fine guard to put next to Luka. He could, keep that back line afloat. He's happy to be more of a shooting guard than a point guard, but you start to look at this roster up and down and, kind of like, as a Celtics fan waiting year in and year out for this big trade that's never coming. And it seems like the Mavericks are kind of in that position. And I don't know what that is, whether it's the assets and some of the moves they've even made are puzzling, like moving on from Seth Curry and players like that. So I'm not really sure what's going on. I think it is probably time for a little bit of a change in the front office, because whatever the approach is, it doesn't seem to make sense, and it's time maybe to tear things down a bit and get some flexibility. Maybe tell Luka he can eat sandwiches all off season. We're just going to kind of chill next year and tear some of this down. But it's really tough to figure it out. They've kind of run out of options.
The only other thing I want to ask you regarding Dallas as well, let's touch on Jason Kidd really quickly, because I know that a lot of the blame doesn't fall on his shoulders in terms of the roster construction, and you can only do so much with what you're given. But at the same time, there's not a lot of change from last season, and we've already seen such a drastic dip, like I said, in the defensive end of the floor. And then you look a little bit deeper at both the offense and defense, and they're doing the exact same things as last season, just having a lot less success doing it. Have they just run their course with Jason Kidd? Do they need something fresh, new ideas, a new voice to be heard in the locker room? Are the players just not basically willing to fight for him in the same manner that they were a season ago? Because it seems like a recurring theme for Jason Kidd, where it's his last couple of teams now, he managed to, absolutely steady the ship, improve them drastically defensively, and then the following season they fell back to where they were before he came in. So is it just an issue where he himself isn't able to carry a team long term because they just get sick of hearing the same message all the time? Or is it just that, this is a different case entirely where roster construction is just completely hindering his potential to improve the team?
I think both are bad, but Jason Kidd lacks creativity. It's like you said, everything he does, he kind of puts in a couple systems, and that's what we're going to do. There's not really much in change. I mean, again, not that there's a ton you can do, but they don't seem to try to play small at all. I would wonder what a lineup would look like. You go Luka, Dinwiddie, Hardaway, Finney-Smith, and toss Bertans out there and just see what happens. And there's none of that. So it feels like it's a lot of stale air. It's time to sort of move him on. You want to find somebody that, again, really engages Luka, engages kind of that. And it's time for him to have a coach to talk him through those stuff like, hey, maybe as a leader, you should come work out a little bit more during the offseason. Hey, maybe at the beginning of the game, you kind of pass the ball a lot, get everybody in and kind of moving around and kind of show them a lot of stuff. So this play was really great, but did you notice you dribbled the ball for 15 seconds? Just kind of some of the stuff like that. It's just the only analogy I can think of it is it's like watching somebody with this just beautiful car put cheap gas in it and drive it very slowly. It's just There's nothing going on here. So yeah, I think you need somebody. You need to make some moves. You need some fresh players in here. Try to find somebody else but Jason Kidd. And again, that's always tough, right? Because who's the coach, right? Nobody wants to fire anybody unless you have the replacement. I don't, but and this would be a time to take a swing on somebody.
Yeah, that's a great question from Matt in the chat as well. What would be the ideal player to fit with Luka's style?
I'm trying to think like Jared Allen. Like I think Jared Allen and him would run an incredible pick and roll. Allen just gets to kind of do defense stuff. So again, that kind of pogo stick big man who's just looking to touch the ball around the rim, something like that. Again, in terms of wing players, I'm trying to think of somebody like maybe like a Brandon Ingram or something, somebody who can, is fine doing catch and shoot threes a little bit, can take the ball and create a little bit themselves in one-on-one, but is kind of happy letting somebody else facilitate for him. I don't know if Brandon Ingram is the right name there, but just trying to think of a wing again, somebody who is a capable shooter, but is more than happy to kind of set themselves up and catch and shoot and stuff, like kind of old school Clay, if you will.
Yeah, I think the Jared Allen one is a really good talking point because I think that having a big who can create vertical spacing for that team is huge, especially running pick and rolls with Luka, where, if you're comfortable just playing above the rim, you have basically the perfect guy to create for you. Your role is very set and specific. And yeah, if you're talking 3-and-D guys, I think David's absolutely nailed it. I think Mikal Bridges is like the perfect prototype to play alongside Luka. If you can get him those two, not necessarily those two players, but those two types of players on that roster where Luka is able to rely on a secondary scorer who can create for himself, but is also happy just being a spot-up shooter, and then a reliable big man who can play above the rim. That's when this team, I think, takes that next step forward and becomes a completely different proposition to deal with, both in the regular season and the playoffs specifically. But again, like he said, when it comes to Jason Kidd, he's just very one-dimensional in what he does. And I was just looking now as well at their year-on-year stats in terms of shot profiling. It's the exact same. They are, again, 40+% of their field goal attempts come from beyond the arc, the exact same as it's been every single season he's been there. 19% of theirs shots come from mid-range, basically the exact same percentage has been there. 28% from the rim. Everything is the exact same. Their defense is the exact same in terms of what it gives up as well. They limit the number of threes. They've been top 10 in opponent frequency from beyond the arc the last few seasons. The only difference, again, is just the efficiency that teams are scoring, in particular at the rim this season, which is alarming. And like you said, Maxi Kleber being out doesn't help that. But I guess the fact that we're relying on Maxi Kleber to be in the rotation to drastically change things for Dallas is a concern in itself. So, yeah, it's two-pronged for sure. They need roster changes. I think they might need a coach change as well going forward if they're actually ever going to fulfill Luka's true potential. But getting those pieces isn't going to be straightforward when they don't have much to give up. Like you said, there's not a whole lot of valuable assets on the table. There's some pretty bad contracts on that roster to try and work through. They do have picks, I guess, but how valuable are they going to be if they're constantly going to be in and around that 4-5 seed all the time in the West, just because Luka can win you so many games on his own during the regular season. So I guess the outlook for Dallas this season, what do you think their ceiling is? Is there any value in the marketplace for them? And then next season, do you think that we're going to finally see some wholesale changes in the offseason for them if they do fall short in that second round again?
Yeah, one easy trade target quickly. They need to get Rashawn Holmes out of Sacramento. It's time to call them and throw some second-round picks or something for him. He would be nice. But, for the rest of the season, I'm going to kind of avoid the Mavericks. I'd be happy to sort of go against them as opposed to bet on them. They've been a terrible team against the spread. They've been an over team all year. I'm not betting any Mavericks futures. I'm going to wait and see. Again, it seems to all be based on this hope that someone's coming from somewhere for something, and I'm happy to just kind of pass on that. So, in terms of the rest of the season, happy to back them if Luka's playing and it's a spot of engagement. They've been a good team against good teams. When there's like a big game on TNT, like Luka plays up for whatever reason. So in those kind of spots, happy to look at them. But otherwise, looking at the other team, look at the other team's team total over. Definitely not looking for them in futures. Kind of curious to see who they get in the first round. Hopefully get a good number going against them. It's hard to feel optimistic about Dallas.
Yeah, definitely. I think going forward, it's just a game to game. Like you said, playing overs, 4-game overs, or opponent team total overs in certain spots, especially if the other team is efficient in what they can do offensively. And teams that attack the rim are just having incredible success scoring against Dallas this season. So those would be the ones I'd look at. I have no intention of adding any sort of Dallas to my futures portfolios either. And I don't think we see anything drastic from them before the trade deadline. But I think we see a pretty big shakeup in the offseason when they realize just how quickly they fall flat. Yeah. That would be my assessment on them. Let's get into today, though. Today's action across the board. Let's have a look at the bets we've made. We'll pull mine up on the screen. Alex, we had the pleasure of talking through a couple of these already today. One I didn't have on the show earlier today that I'm on is the under 232 in Orlando, Philadelphia. That's now dropped to 230. I personally want Joel Embiid for this under, and I know it kind of goes against what we've seen in terms of results, but that's the way I would look at it. Quickly, actually, before we move on from Dallas, just because we've got a question in there from our good friend, is Luka MVP campaign dead, do you think?
It's never dead, and that it's not impossible that Luka just goes nuts and drags them up to the 3 seed or something. But I'm certainly not betting Luka, and definitely not at the market numbers. I would look at, Nikola Jokic, who's the favorite at this point. I think there might be some value in Embiid, but I'm definitely putting Luka aside.
If you got him earlier in the season at better prices, and you had it in your pocket already, would you be looking to trade off of that number and acquire something else? Or are you happy just to ride that number out? Just like you said, given the fact that he could just go absolutely insane for the remainder of the season. And statistically, that's not going to be an issue. It's just the only thing that could hinder him is team performance, I guess.
I'm trying to think. His number, I don't think ever got better than really 5-1. So it's not like you're holding a big fat ticket in your pocket. So yeah, I think you just ride it out.
Yeah, definitely fair. I don't think it's dead either. I think it's the narrative will always be strong enough for him that he's always going to be in contention, and he'll be one of the 3 names at the end of the season. But yeah, the team success, I think, is what could hurt him pretty drastically. And if he misses any more time as well, that could be enough as well to cement it. But yeah, going back to today's bets that we've made, like I said, under 232 for me, Orlando, Philadelphia. OKC, I got in at +4 last night. It's +5 now, a much better number. I suggest you go and grab that one. I grabbed a Washington Wizards -5. I have no problem at 5.5, 6 either. And a Washington Wizards team total 122.5. Any disagreement on those ones? And then do you want to mention the ones that you've also bet, and we can go through those?
Yeah, I think that you're on the right side here. Again, my only pushback on that Magic Sixers total is you have to know if Embiid's playing. If he's out, that's an over spot. As we talked a little bit about in the Bet US show, the pace goes way up. The offensive defensive efficiency drops out. So I would wait and see if Embiid's playing. I'm on Oklahoma City. I grabbed the +5. I think that's just an awesome spot. The Thunder might just be good. They might just be a good basketball team.
Yeah,
and it's exactly wild to think about that in a season where like Sacramento's the 3 seed and the Thunder are going to make like the playoffs. Like it's the Western Conference is just wild.
Do you think the market's not treating them right because it's the Thunder and they're kind of just expecting them to bottom out at some point, assuming that they want to tank? Because I think we're far enough into the season now where their body of work says they're a good team. And for me, there's no reason or signs to suggest that they're going to start going in the other direction. So is it a couple more weeks maybe of potentially grabbing some really good value on OKC before they start getting treated like a good team in the marketplace?
We'll see. I mean, I've been betting them for a couple of weeks now, and especially at home, they've been fantastic at home. I'm trying to think. They have a winning record. They're 15-10 at home, and you look at the standings again. They're a game out of 6 in the West. A game. That's it, and it's just nuts. So I mean, they've been great. And again, it speaks to maybe it's again that home team thing we were talking about. But I agree. I think that a lot of people look at the market. It's kind of what we saw early in the season with the Pacers and the Jazz, when everyone was like, no, they're gonna suck. Just wait. And it's like, no, this is actually, there's some decent players here. You put it all together, it works. And Oklahoma City, they've embraced playing really good defense. And as much as you roll your eyes at this, they play hard every night. And there's not a lot of teams that come out and try to kick ass 82 games a year. So I think you're right. It's going to be Oklahoma City time until further notice.
Yeah, exactly. And then I believe you made another unders play as well so far.
I did have the over in the Nets game. I'm waiting to see what the injury report looks like for that. The Lakers Nets, basically no superstars for the Lakers, which means Russ is just going to run up and down as quick as he can. The Nets have been great. But yeah, the other play that I added, a Toronto Raptors team total under. And you might think it odd with OG Anunoby out betting an under. He's a great defensive player, but you start to look down the roster and man, wow. I don't know who's going to get those minutes, but they're not going to score a lot of points because they're not very good. I mean, the Raptors have been a mess. The Suns have finally stabilized, after a really rough, probably first month and a half, 2 months of the season. They've started to settle down. The defense has been much better, especially at home lately. I think their last 6 games at home, the team total their opponents like 1-5 or 5-1 to the under, if you will. So it seems like they've righted the ship a little bit there, and happy to just take that under. I'm just going to keep fading this Raptors team. It's just a mess, and anytime they're without one of those starting 5, things get really ugly pretty quick. So I took a Raptors team total under 110.5.
Yeah, I might get there still, or even a 4-game under on that one. I think, like you said, it's not even just plug and play someone else, because Nick Nurse plays his guys like 46 minutes a night. It's whoever that backup is going to play very significant minutes. Whether they go with Precious Achiuwa or Chris Boucher, I don't know what the decision will be for tonight, but it's not going to be someone that's going to provide the same level of scoring threat consistently that OG has, because he's been quite a good catch and shoot player, I think, all season long. And when he can catch fire from deep as well, we've seen nights where he goes 5 for 6, 4 for 5, 4 for 4 from deep. You're not going to get that reliable shooting from any of the other guys that come in place of him. And I do think that still defensively, they do match up decently with Phoenix just because of the length that they possess. And Phoenix being a team who loves to operate in the mid-range, that's not an area you're going to have a ton of success against Toronto either. So this should be a much slower paced game. And like you said, I'd lean towards the under as well. I have value on the under. So I'm more than likely going to be adding that as well to my tickets today. Any other games on the board that you haven't bet yet that you might?
No, I don't think that there's anything else. Again, I've been kind of eyeing the Pistons all day, but I should have bet that already because if Luka's announced out, it's just going to get worse. So I'll put that one aside. I think I've got everything that I'm looking for so far.
What are your thoughts really quickly on Portland's situation at the moment? We won't go on too much of a tangent. I mean, they're -2 tonight at home to Atlanta. Trey's questionable. That'll obviously swing either way, depending on whether he does or doesn't play for the Hawks. But the Blazers are a team who have kind of just been in a bit of free fall at the moment. They had the toughest schedule in the NBA up until a couple of weeks ago to date. So the assumption was, well, this schedule's getting easier. They're playing a lot more home games. They should string things together, but it hasn't quite transpired that way. Do you think it's just a lot of the early season pressures catching up with them? Do you think that the system isn't quite as reliable as what many people assumed it might be, given the hot start they had in the opening month? Is it a combination of all those things, or do you just think that the team isn't very good?
I don't think the team's very good. I didn't think they were good during the offseason. I've got Portland to miss the playoffs. I've got the regular season win total under. And it's one of those teams where the starting 5 on paper looks really nice as long as everybody's healthy and happy. You got Lillard, you got Simons, Josh Hart, the perfect guy to slide in next to there, Jeremy Grant, Nurkic. Boy, that should be a lot of fun. But as soon as one of those guys goes down, it's Nasir Little or Drew Eubanks or Justice Winslow or Gary Payton II. Shaedon Sharp's been really fun, but things get ugly fast on this roster, and we'll see. I'm going to wait. I actually kind of hope Trae Young is announced out and we get a little bit more value on the Hawks. If Trae Young is announced out and that gets to like +3, +3.5, I'm going to scoop up some Hawks tonight, which I can't believe that I'm actually saying. But it's just I've been looking for spots to fade Portland pretty much the last couple of weeks. I don't see that changing.
Yeah, I can see it'll clear 3 if Trey's out, in my opinion. And like you said, it makes the Hawks a pretty valuable side in that spot. I actually like how they match up. I think offensively, they're still going to be able to get theirs. Portland's defense is just not good. They basically try to outscore teams wherever they can. And I think it's a Hawks team that can cause them problems on the inside with the size that they have. I think Nurkic is just a really bad defender and he's being exposed pretty regularly this season. So, yeah, if Noops is on the Hawks, then the Hawks are the right side. I mean, we can only talk him into betting him so often. I'm
1-0 in the last 2 months betting on the Hawks. So
exactly. So the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So that's the bets that we've made for tonight. I will probably be looking to add position on Toronto Phoenix under, whether it's full game under or Toronto team total under, which Noops is already on as well. The rest of my bets are already up on the screen for you there. Noops joining me on the Thunder, who, like we said, they're just good. So just bet them.
They're just good.
It's really that simple. Let's get into the big segment for today, though, and take a look at the squad
See what
ride.
you guys got. Come on.
You're very confident, I'll say that. But you shouldn't be.
All right, Noobs. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell
I
you.
love that clip from Community, by the way. I don't know if people don't know what that's from, but you need to watch the first season of Community because it's just an amazing scene.
You need to watch Community through because it is a fantastic series. And for those who don't know what Squad Ride is, I'm going to tell Noobs all of the Squad Ride picks put forth in our Discord chat, which you can join with the link below. And he's going to pick out his best one for today. The Squad Ride team is 3-1 this season. Our good friend Spread Astaire is the only one to have picked the wrong one because they got every other play right that day. So he managed to pick out the loser, which is fantastic. Like I said, the egos in that chat is just getting out of hand now. So Noobs, don't be too kind. Feel free to pick which one you think is the best or the worst for that matter. I really don't care. Here's what we have, though, on deck. We've got the Hawks first quarter money line, which, like you said, is going to depend on Trae Young's availability as to what the price is going to be there, but you could get some good value. A Suns first quarter team total over. They've been performing much better in the first quarter lately since they've had all of their pieces back. We have Minnesota Timberwolves money line against the Sacramento Kings. We've got the under 238 in that game as well. We have Wizards first quarter team total over 30.5 against the San Antonio Spurs, which is obviously my pick of the bunch, just based on what I've bet so far. We've also got a Raptors Suns first quarter overs, so that ties in, I guess, to the Suns' previous one. So that's an interesting look there, and a couple of player prop ones as well that we have. So we've got Jalen Williams over 1.5 steals and blocks against
Jalen Williams.
The Jalen J-Dub Williams against a Golden State team who loves to turn the ball over. So he might just get there by default, to be honest, if nothing else. And Nick Claxton over 2.5 blocks tonight against the Lakers, missing a lot of players and probably playing pinball for most of that game. So that's actually pretty good look as well. But those are all the Squad Ride ones. What stands out to you out of all of those, be it a first quarter, the full games, the player props, anything in particular that has caught your attention?
T-Wolves money line or Wizards first quarter team total over is where I am at this point. Hawks first quarter money line. I don't know without Trae Young how they're going to start the game. The Suns first quarter team total over, I think that's a solid look, but I think they're just going to be happy to have a lead and kind of keep the pace slow. I don't know if I want to bet under in this Minnesota-Sacramento game. There's just so many scenarios where it goes way over. I like a Rap Suns under, so I'm definitely not going to take the first quarter over. I'm still not really sure which Jalen Williams you're talking about, so I'm going to skip that one. Claxton over 2.5 blocks. That number just seemed high to me. I'm trying to pull up Claxton's game log here to see. I mean, has he regularly been over that number? Apparently. Wow, look at this guy.
Yeah.
A lot of threes.
I mean, it also might just be one of those situations where, like, we're going to get an investigation as to whether these stats are real and the blocks are eligible. But as of right now, yeah, he's getting close to 3 a night.
It's been a rough weekend for all the "this is rigged" crowd. So let's try to put that aside. So I'm going to skip the Claxton blocks because now you've got me incensed about that. But give me the Timberwolves. I want to go Timberwolves money line. Let's ride, squad. The Timberwolves, the Wood Dogs, getting it done at home. No beams. We're not lighting any beams.
Timberwolves money line, official Squad Ride for today. I like it. I like the Timberwolves at the moment, how they're playing. Yeah, and you get another situation where a home team gets another home game back to back, and Noops is going to go down his rabbit hole later after the show as to whether that's efficient and effective and why it's efficient and effective, and are they playing better in those situations. So Minnesota Timberwolves money line is the official Squad Ride for today. I probably would have gone Wizards first quarter team total over 30.5 because the Wizards is just going to score for fun. But I like it. I like something different.
Spurs, man.
It's fading my Spurs. I know. Thank goodness as well. We rode them for way too long. They were extremely successful if you just bet them in the first half. Unfortunately, there was a lot of full game ones where things went to crap, it's fair to say, in the fourth quarter of a lot of those games. But hey, speaking of, just before we go, have you had a chance to look at a lot of these bottom feeders first half splits versus full game splits by any chance?
Some of the statistical splits, I haven't had a chance to break down the odds, but you see it. The San Antonio and Houston specifically are two of these teams where they just give up. I mean, the two of them still have net ratings of like -13 in the fourth quarter, with the next closest teams like -4. It's unbelievable. Those, I think, are the only two teams where I can point at and say actively, like, as the game goes on, they're getting worse. I mean, some of the other bad teams, we talked about the Hornets, they're playing hard. They just stink. Detroit is too. I mean, they just can't win. They're still pushing. It's not like that's all falling apart in the fourth quarter. And that's really it. We're kind of only down to 4 of these really bad teams. Now, I mean, the Magic don't have a great record, but they're still playing good basketball. They're still trying. Again, Raptors, Pacers are next in the East. You got the Lakers, Blazers, Thunder. Like, the league is pretty good this year. So you've only got really 4 of those teams, and 2 of them, definitely the Rockets and the Spurs. You want to look first half, first quarter, and fade them late.
Yeah, live betting against them is very profitable, I can say. Basically, almost any number at the start of the third quarter is
really
good.
Any number.
Yeah, literally any number. But that is all for us for today. We've had a great time again talking hoops. Alex, appreciate you taking the time to jump on. I do get the pleasure of chatting hoops with you multiple times a week. But for anyone who is tuning into this show that doesn't tune into our other shows or hasn't had the opportunity to come across any of your work with BetSperts, let everyone know where they can find you and your stuff.
Yeah, the best place to start is, of course, on Twitter at _Noops. I host a show called Brown Bag Bets every day. That's 11:30 a.m. Eastern in the morning. And it's just a quick 20, 30 minutes, myself and Andy Molitor from the Deep Dive, hitting on the big events of the day, throwing out some picks, talking through some processes, and kind of having a little bit of fun. So check that out. And again, you can check us both out on the BetUS NBA show. We're together on Fridays. I'm the host Monday and Wednesday. So it's a lot of fun. We have a good time, and check it all out.
That we do, and we will have a lot of fun on the show again. I'm sure I can wrangle you back on, hopefully before the All-Star break, and we can talk some more hoops, and hopefully, like we said, deep dive into a little bit more of your research on some of these home road splits as well, which are becoming pretty consistent as the season goes on, and nothing that looks like wearing away, I don't think, anytime soon. But appreciate every one of you in the chat, as always, jumping in live, and everyone that watches on replay, be it on Spotify or YouTube. Please do drop us a thumbs up if you can. That helps us out a ton. Leave us a nice review, or even a bad review. Just leave a review. I don't really mind at this point. Thanks to our producer, Chris, as always, for your great work behind the scenes. Guys, we will be back in a couple of days' time. Thursday, my time. Wednesday, Noob's time. So I look forward to chatting more hoops with you guys then with another very special guest.